Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, in the first quarter of this year, the Texas economy has seemed to be going sideways, but globally, oil production is going straight up in the Middle East, while domestically here, and especially in Texas, production's being cut back and it's affecting our Texas economy. Marc Flaster is a frequent guest on Texas Insider TV. He comes from the Sandler O'Neill firm on Wall Street, where he is a managing and founding partner. So what's ahead for the Texas economy the duration of 2016? We'll ask Marc Flaster of Sandler O'Neill, and we're pleased to be able to talk about the Texas economy today. Well, Mr. Flaster, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming in to visit with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to join you and talk about things that you wanted me to talk about.
Well, we've got plenty of economic indicators. The unemployment figures have come out recently. For the latest month, the Texas Comptroller has been releasing his tax income to the state numbers. Let's start first, though, if we can, with more of the national scene. You're with Sandler and O'Neill right there up on Wall Street. You've been following Texas banks and advising them for decades. What are you all seeing, let's say, for the duration of 2016 on the economic front?
Well, let me first say, before we get too far down, that all these discussions and my replies to you are personal opinions.
Okay.
So I want to be sure that no one says that you said something and I saw something else. I'm not data dependent, as the Fed says, and a lot of things that seem to culture markets are interpretations of the information that's available, and there's a lot of speculation in the markets.
Gotcha. I think what you're saying there is that there's a lot of uncertainty. We've had oil and gas bounce from $28 or $30 3 or 4 months ago back up to $48 today. Unemployment, as I mentioned, is going sideways. Is there any perhaps hope the Federal Reserve is going to be meeting in a week or two? What's the outlook for interest rates that you're seeing the Fed might be moving or not moving?
The biggest ingredient that everyone is constantly, let's say, frustrated with is that they want to see inflation. They say if there's inflation, there'll be opportunity to raise prices. If there's opportunity to raise prices, then there'll be an opportunity to pay people more. And if they can pay people more, they'll have more money to spend. So let's take that apart, okay?
Okay.
First of all, there is no inflation. None. Okay, it's not hiding under the table. It's not in my pocket. It does not exist. There won't be any inflation, maybe in my lifetime. Okay?
Really?
Or yours as well.
Okay.
Secondly, the government is trying to create inflation because all those people who sit around their ivory towers and have tenure in their jobs, they think that if you can create inflation, that it will have a benefit to our economy, as I just mentioned. So there's been a big movement in this country to raise the minimum wage. New Jersey's about to raise it to $10. California's already established what their minimum wage is going to be at $15 over a couple of years. New York State has followed pretty much the same routine, and there's 20 some odd states that already have it on their books to do this, and another 6 that are about to vote for it. I think those are the numbers.
Okay.
Now, what's going to happen for that is that companies will be faced with higher costs, especially those that are in service industries, and they'll turn around and say, I can't afford to pay people more, given my margins, and therefore I'm going to get rid of some people and cut back on my employment. So that means we have fewer people employed. Then you go and look at the company and says, well, if I have to pay these people more, I have people that I really have to retain that are important to my company. I can't, interchange them with computers or other people and the like, or stay at the low end. And those people are going to look at the spread of their income, at their marginal income, over what I'm paying these other people and say, hey, I can't work for $10 an hour for whatever I'm making. When this guy's making $10 an hour, you've got to pay me more. And so right away, my sales costs in the important part of my company have gone up, and the unimportant part of my company, they've gone up. And I turn around and say, well, I'll have to charge more. And then I look about my competition, and they're trying to eat it some way. And next thing you know, my margins go down, and I'm threatened. Okay. Today, on the way down here, I flew United Airlines.
Okay.
And I was in, as I walked through the terminal at Newark, I went through this large area that was a supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a cup of tea and a muffin.
Okay.
And I was given a ticket. And I said, where do I pay? They said, over there. I looked around, there was no person over there.
Interesting.
I'm at a checkout counter, like in the supermarket, you got all these checkout counters with people. This was just a computer terminal. You take the ticket you got, and it's up to you to do this, and you put it down, face down on the glass, and it tells you, reports down to you, the price of what you paid for, and it has out what you want to use, your card or money, whatever. No person.
And you ran your credit card, I guess, at
Yeah,
that
right.
point.
But it was all on your honor system.
And
You want to
then-
walk out with merchandise, walk out.
And did you fall over when you saw the price of your glass of
Well,
tea
that
at
wasn't,
that point?
that wasn't important. The important part is that there was nobody there. You go into the Delta terminal, actually United as well, and there's desks, tables everywhere, and they have a little iPad on the table, and you put in your flight number, so it'll tell you when the flight's ready, and you put in a bunch of button buns, what you want to eat, and somebody delivers it to you.
No people.
And no people.
How about the retail aspect? You're referring to a specific sector there of personnel being eliminated, but I know Macy's was down earlier this month. I think Kohl's was the latest to say that they were going to miss expectations. I've heard economists say that we're in a bit of a spring funk. Do you see anything in retail sales perhaps picking up?
Well, the big problem with this is big bank stores are now an anathema, okay? They're a dinosaur. People go to stores today to check prices, look at the merchandise, and then they go to electronic aids, whether it be Amazon or whatever, and that's where they buy and shop. And they have the things delivered, you know, it could be next day, whatever Amazon says it is, and then they'll look at it in the box that they get it, and they'll say, well, I like it or don't like it, or that's the wrong color, it wasn't quite what I wanted, they send it back. So when you saw retail sales reported, Macy's reported sales down, Nordstrom reported sales down, Target, Kohl's, all these big companies reported sales down, okay? But the retail sales numbers were up, okay? Because the electronic sales were up. Now Macy's and some of these other companies have gone into electronic, let's say sidebar, to get some of the internet sales. And because of when they're late, and secondly, the cost of putting all this electronics in place is very big, and the cost has added to their cost function of operating the stores, and so the margin got even slimmer. Now some of the Wall Street, gurus come out and say, well, Macy's owns all the property that their stores are on. So if they were to convert their company to a real estate company, they would be worth a fortune. But remember, that's only a one-time sale. Okay, what do you do with the money? Okay.
Interesting. If we can, I'm going to move now to the Texas and local economy. Folks, I want to thank you again for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. We're visiting today with Marc Flaster, founding principal of Sandler and O'Neill up on Wall Street. Marc, let's look now at the overall global economy, particularly the oil and gas situation. I think prices were down in 2014 for oil and gas about 30%. 2015 about 50%. We've seen a bounce this year, but to set the framework to get into the Texas economy and the oil and gas, what are you seeing globally for oil and gas? Saudi Arabia said the other day they're going to continue to pump, in fact, increase oil production.
Well, let's take the engineering of oil production.
Okay.
It's changed dramatically, and so what things were in the past have become less expensive, but also
Talking about fracking.
But
fracking.
the whole engineering has changed. It's become a lot less expensive. Not less expensive, but it's become more possible to get more out of the ground than they were. Now, just as an example, we'll talk about rig count. Now, Wall Street doesn't read anything past headlines. That's as far as they go. Rig count has come down from thousands to hundreds. and the Wall Street idiots turn around and say, oh, that must be less oil production. That's not the case. Most of those rigs were old style, and they dug a hole straight down. The new style is for things to go and wander around and find out where else the oil is.
The fracking everybody's heard about recently.
So you have engineering-wise, a more efficient system to find oil, and secondly, it's cheaper than it was to use these other facilities, because the other facilities you had to dig a hole here and dig a hole there and dig a hole there. Now you can wander around with one hole and pick it all out.
And the inventory of oil and gas, I guess, is what you're getting at. It is still in the ground to be produced.
Well, every time you drill a hole, you build inventory. You don't have to bring it up. So the next thing you look at and say, well, if it's become more efficient, let's say efficient in terms of bringing oil up to the surface, therefore there was more oil produced, and the amount of oil produced has outstripped the demand. And at the same time, more oil was coming into the surface, the demand was going down for several reasons. One, the economies of the consumers were going into recession, and secondly, the efficiency of the marketplace. For example, the idea that we're going to have electric cars, so that less gasoline. Cars today don't have 8 cylinders. They run on 4 cylinders, and they go lickety-split. They go a lot faster. So the idea of putting turbochargers in an automobile, of having better compression in the engines, and the cars are lighter, so there's able to get more gas,
so
more miles out of the gallon.
So the demand is affected. How about the idea that you've talked about before, talking about efficiency? Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle Eastern countries, I think it costs $7 to $9 to get a barrel of oil out of the ground. Russia and China are somewhere in the 20 to 30s. In the United States, it's 30 to 60.
Right.
Talk about that efficiency a little bit and how that's going to lead to continued oil and gas production globally, which means continued lower prices of impacting Texas.
You've hit a very sensitive point, because what people are not giving credit to or weight to is that all these countries have always been a big social provider. And Saudi Arabia, for example, provides free education. They provide transportation at a reduced rate. Stroke to believe that the supporter of themselves is coming from the government.
So they need the production to maintain those services.
Well, if they don't maintain the services, then the people get in the street, and they all remember what happened in Cairo, and they remember what happened in Tiananmen Square, and they look around and say, we can't have people riot in the streets.
Okay.
We cannot have that. So the only way to keep them out of the streets is we have to keep them give them the benefits. So Saudi Arabia here, as oil prices have come down, has tapped into their reserve fund, and they're pulling the reserve fund like $10 billion a month. They figure that the reserve fund is all gone in 5 years. So you look at today and you say, well, the noise comes out of the paperwork that they're going to shift their economy to what? They don't grow anything. They're not going to grow anything. It's all sand dunes, okay? And so they have to import everything. And they even import labor, because nobody works. And if you look at the other countries, not just of that group, but other places, the whole premise of commodity, use of commodities for foreign exchange, all these countries have the same problem, that there's less produced, less need. China was a big consumer of all of these products, and they're cutting back on their economy. But the big thing is that you need foreign exchange. The only reason to get foreign exchange is to exchange your commodity for dollars. Okay? And when you change that, if you have a commodity that has less value, you're going to get less dollars. Now take Venezuela. Venezuela is bankrupt, totally bankrupt. There's no way that that country could ever come out of itself.
And I think they even had their president impeached the other day, going through great political strife as well. Brazil, okay.
Now Brazil is a producer of oils, but as well as sugar and vegetables. And they turn around and say, well, you got Russia producing at maximum rate, you got Saudi Arabia at maximum rate, you got Iran on the way back to where they were at double where they are, from 3 million barrels a day to 6 or maybe more. And they say, well, these guys are going through some turmoil, and I need to get foreign exchange for my oil, so I'm going to undercut them and take away some of their markets. Saudi Arabia says, not on my life, you're not going to do that, so they lower their price. So the international price of delivered oil is very different from what we read in.
So you've got all these international dynamics that a lot of Americans, certainly Texans, probably don't know. Let's drill down in how that's going to impact the Texas economy. You've been advising banks for decades, trying to forecast loan demand and so forth. I think the comptroller said that 2015, the Texas economy grew about 3.5%, added over 400,000 jobs. What are you seeing in the remainder of 2016 economically for Texas?
Well, the Texas economy, whether you like it or not, is very dependent on energy.
Okay.
And whether it be wind, which is subsidized, or without subsidy, wind would be basically propellers in your, making
Out in the countryside.
Pinwheels,
Yeah.
okay. The collateral damage of, or collateral, let's say, influence of declining production and people being laid off. So the first thing these companies have done is that they tried to become more efficient, or they become more efficient in running their companies, not just efficiency in engineering. So they turn around and say, well, I don't need 10,000 people, I can operate with 5. So those people get laid off. Well, let's say the guy's working in Abu Dhabi and he gets, the boss tells him a message that we've got to cut back. You're no longer producing, having overtime. Maybe you only work 4 days a week instead of 6. And the first thing he does is he sends a note home, which may be to Houston and his wife, and he says, honey, you got to cut back. You got to be more careful. So the boat goes, the pool guy goes, the landscape goes, the kid comes out of private school, okay, she's now worried, so she stops spending, she keeps in the bank, and then this whole thing, trickles down. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen like that. The difference between what's going on in Texas or our country is that the housing crisis affected everybody all at once. However you got there, Congress, people overborrowing, banks, I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
But the end result is that it happened so fast, it happened to everybody. This is not happening in the same manner. It's being spread out over time.
Here in Texas, you're talking about, yeah.
And so people look at it and say, oh, well, it didn't affect me. Okay, the Johnstown flood, if you read the book, okay, the flood was up there, okay, the water was coming down this way. These people were all getting flood out, and then they were screaming and yelling that they're going to lose their lives. These people down here said, it's a bright day, everything's fine. Okay? The water got to them, and all of a sudden they had a problem. So you see that happening here.
And you've talked particularly before, I know, about Houston in particular, the oil and gas capital of the world, that it may be coming.
Well, it's already affected in some way. Houston growth in employment this year, although people are moving into Houston, it's still at a big rate, not as rate as it was before, but Houston will maybe grow 1% this year. Housing prices have already started to come down. It's in the heart of the sell that they count for homes on the market is a lot longer.
Okay.
Double, triple bids for homes is no longer there. Now you got one bid, or maybe not get the bid. A lot of the retail stores, as I mentioned, are having difficulty. The Houston, if you read the Houston Business Journal, reports that there's a lot of restaurants opening up. That's on page 5, and then on page 7 is all the restaurants that closed. So it's changing over in that regard. There's more risk in terms of running a store, and the thing that's most important in all this is that at the political level, they're still running their economies and their cities as if they were receiving the kind of tax revenue they got before.
So we need to be careful.
Well, it's going to show up.
If it's going to be prudent. Let me ask you one final question here, Marc Flaster with Sandler and O'Neill in Wall Street. I know you got to go and return to your day job of advising banks across the state of Texas. There's been some concern lately, or questioning, of the Department of Labor's unemployment figures. A lot of folks claim that labor force participation across the country is now at a record low rates, and it's not showing up anywhere, but it does impact the unemployment figures. What do you all and your peers on Wall Street think of the unemployment?
Well, remember, I'm not talking about Wall Street, I'm talking about Marc Flaster.
Okay.
So if you look at the numbers, in this case we are data dependent.
Okay.
We look at the numbers, we see that the unemployment rate has fallen to 5%. Now the way we got to 5% from 10% is we took away the denominator. So the denominator went down.
Denominator being total people in
In
employment.
the employment force. So the denominator went down, and that made it look like there was a falling unemployment rate. There wasn't falling unemployment, there are less people working. Okay? Then you look around and say, well, why is that the case? 10,000 people turn 65 every day.
Really?
Okay? And most every one of those people is now on some kind of government assistance. Okay? Not because they're weak or they have medical problems, but they're taking advantage of the Social Security that they made contributions to. There's other government benefits that they're taking advantage of, and they see there's no reason for me to go to work. Now they talk about the increase of people over 65 are now welcome, at
Walmart or
Walmart
whatever.
and the like, but that's not the big, the greatest part of the population. It's a small segment, and so if you look at the travel industry has focused all their attention at this sector, okay? Because they're the people that have free money and they want to get out of Dodge. And so they're willing to go everywhere. If it's a bucket list or whatever, they want to go and see the world, and they have plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the wealthiest people in America. Now, you look at our government's policies, they dropped interest rates to nothing, basically nothing. And who lives off of their money on looking at the interest that they receive on their money?
You can't live off your nest egg anymore because it's not earning anything.
So all these people are looking at what they have and they say, well, I'll sell the house and I'll move to a condo, something down in Florida, I'll rent for the rest of whatever, and take that money. And what they're looking at is that their assets are being used, and they have nothing to reserve to fall back on, and they're not scared. But they say, I'll just keep running this out because at the end of the day, government's going to step in.
Well, speaking of running
That's
out,
why they vote for all these people who offer everything from soup to nuts and ice cream with sprinkles on it.
in the political cycle. Speaking of running out of time, we're running out of time and gonna leave it at that. Appreciate you coming by and say thank you. We hope you'll come back again, Mark.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and I look forward to talking again.
Folks, we want to thank you for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, sponsored by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. Thanks to Marc Flaster for coming by. I'm Jim Cardle.